Rain fell relentlessly on the cemetery grounds, soaking the hem of my black dress as I stood frozen before my son's casket. Matthew Brooks, my only child, was being lowered into the earth, and with him, a part of me vanished too. I was 66, a mother burying her son, a pain no parent should endure. Beside me stood my husband of 35 years, Gerald Brooks. His hand gripped my elbow, not in comfort, but in urgency. "We need to talk," he said, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "Gerald, not now," I whispered, barely able to form the words. "We just buried our son." "That's exactly why now is the perfect time," he replied, guiding me away from the mourners. My sister Linda watched from a distance, her brows furrowed with concern, but she didn't follow. Gerald led me to our car, parked a few feet away. The windows fogged from the rain as he reached into his jacket and handed me a manila envelope. I opened it with trembling hands, my breath catching as I read the top line, my name. Below it, legal words I never imagined I'd read at this point in life: divorce petition. I looked up at him in disbelief. "What is this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Now that Matthew is gone, there's nothing tying us together," he said calmly. "I'm taking over his business. The house is legally mine now." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard him right. "You can stay until I return from my vacation," he continued, starting the car. 3 weeks. Think of it as a grace period." "A vacation?" I choked out. "Gerald, our son just died." "Life goes on," he said, without a hint of emotion. "Mine will go on without you." As we drove away from the cemetery, I stared at his profile, a face I had once known so well. How had I missed the stranger hiding behind those familiar lines? "Why now?" I asked. He didn't even turn his head. "Because 35 years is a lifetime. I've served my sentence." The words hit me harder than the funeral had our marriage been a punishment to him. When we arrived at the house, Matthew's house, where we had moved in to help him after his divorce, Gerald went upstairs to pack. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers, the ticking clock, the only sound in a home now empty of life. My son was gone. My husband wanted me gone. At 66, everything I thought I knew had crumbled within a week. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake in the quiet of the guest room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tapping against the windows. The grief was a deep, consuming hollow, but beneath it, something else began to simmer, a low, quiet anger. 3 days before Matthew's accident, he had called me. His voice was tense, nervous even. "Mom, can we meet for lunch next week? I need to talk to you. It's about Dad and the business." I had agreed, of course, but that lunch never happened. The memory of that call haunted me now. I couldn't stop wondering what he had wanted to say. And then, as if nudged by something beyond grief, I remembered the safe. After Matthew's divorce, he had asked me to be his emergency contact, even given me the combination to the safe in his office. Just in case, he had said. At the time, I thought it was an act of responsibility. Now, I wasn't so sure. In the morning, after Gerald had left for his so-called vacation, I made my way to Matthew's office. It still smelled faintly of him, his cologne, the books, the life he had built. I opened the closet and pushed aside his hanging suits. There it was, bolted to the wall, a black steel safe. My fingers trembled as I turned the dial. The click of the lock disengaging sounded louder than it should have. Inside were stacks of folders, some labeled with financial terms I didn't understand. And on top of everything else, a sealed envelope. In Matthew's handwriting, one word was scrawled across the front: Mom. I stared at it for a long time, afraid to open it. Afraid of what he might have discovered. Afraid of how far this rabbit hole might go. But I owed it to him to know whatever he had wanted to tell me. I opened it. Inside was a letter and a small USB drive. My hands shook as I unfolded the pages. "Mom, if you're reading this, something has happened to me, or I've finally gotten the courage to tell you the truth. I've been debating whether to share this with you, but you deserve to know. Dad has been draining money from the business for over 2 years. At first I thought it was a mistake, but I hired someone to investigate. It's real." He wrote about offshore accounts, a beachfront property in Costa Rica owned solely by Gerald. He mentioned a woman too, Diane Monroe, his former secretary. The letter ended with words that clutched at my heart. "Be careful, Mom. I love you. You're stronger than you think. Matthew." I sat there, holding the letter to my chest, the USB drive resting in my palm like a key to a truth I never wanted but could no longer ignore. I took a deep breath and walked over to Matthew's desk, where his laptop still sat beneath a light layer of dust. Plugging in the USB drive, I waited as the folders loaded documents, spreadsheets, scanned bank transfers, and something labeled audio.
I wasn't a financial expert, but even I could see the red flags. Large amounts of money had been moved from the company's primary operating account to a string of smaller foreign-based accounts, some in Panama, others in the Cayman Islands. Property records showed the purchase of a villa in Costa Rica. The deed was in Gerald's name only. Then I clicked on the first audio file. It started with Matthew's voice, calm but firm. Dad, these transfers don't make sense. They're not for taxes or investment. Where is this money going? Gerald's voice followed, sharper than I had ever heard it. You're looking at this all wrong, son. I built that business from the ground up. I'm entitled to secure my future. What about Mom's future? Matthew asked. This company is her legacy too. Your mother's always been happy letting others make the hard decisions. That won't change now. I flinched at the coldness in Gerald's tone. It was the same dismissive way he'd often spoken to me over the years, disguised as paternal concern or practical reasoning. There were other recordings, conversations where Gerald talked vaguely but ominously about starting fresh and removing obstacles. In isolation, the words might have seemed metaphorical, but after reading Matthew's letter, they felt like threats. I couldn't process it all alone. I called my sister, Linda. She arrived within the hour, her presence as grounding as ever. I handed her the letter. Her eyes moved quickly over the pages. Then she looked at me and whispered, "That man is dangerous." "We need help," I said. "Someone who understands this legally." Linda nodded. Mark. Her son-in-law, Mark Carter, was an attorney who specialized in financial crimes. Within hours, he was seated at Matthew's desk, flipping through files, scanning documents, shaking his head as he read. "This isn't just unethical," he said grimly. "It's criminal. Gerald has been embezzling company funds and laundering money overseas." He turned to me, his expression softening. "We need to make copies of everything and get these files to someone in law enforcement you can trust." I felt like the ground beneath me was shifting. My husband hadn't just left me. He had been planning an entire new life for years, built on lies, deception, and stolen money. And Matthew had found out. Mark paused, tapping the folder on the desk. "You said Matthew called you days before the accident." I nodded. He was worried. He wanted to meet with me. Mark exchanged a look with Linda. Neither of them spoke what we were all thinking, but the question hung heavy in the air. Had Matthew died because he knew too much? The question haunted me as I tried to sleep that night. Had my son's death really been a tragic accident or something much more sinister? The next morning, as I was organizing some of Matthew's documents, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. "Hello?" I answered. "Mrs. Brooks." A woman's voice, cautious but clear. "My name is Angela Dawson. I worked with your son at the accounting firm before he took over the family business. I think we need to talk." Her voice trembled slightly, and her next word sent a chill down my spine. "It wasn't an accident. Matthew's car crash, I don't believe it was an accident. And I can prove it." I sat down hard in the nearest chair, my fingers tightening around the phone. "What are you saying?" "Not over the phone," Angela insisted. "Please, meet me tomorrow morning at Rosie's Cafe on Maple Street. The back booth near the exit, 10 a.m. I think someone's been watching me." I hung up and immediately called Linda, who didn't hesitate. "I'm coming with you," she said, "and I'm bringing Mark." The next day, the three of us arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early. Rosie's was a cozy, familiar place, ironically, the same cafe where Gerald had once proposed to me decades ago. That memory now felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Angela arrived right on time. She was in her early 30s with auburn hair pulled tightly into a bun and eyes that flicked anxiously around the room as she approached. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Thank you for meeting me. You said Matthew's death wasn't an accident," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Angela opened her bag and pulled out a folder. "Matthew had suspicions about your husband. He confided in me and asked me to keep backup records just in case. Financial documents, yes, but also photos of his car after the crash." She laid out the images on the table. One showed the brake line cleanly severed. "That's not wear and tear," Mark said immediately. "That's deliberate." Angela nodded. He had the car serviced just 2 weeks before the crash. He was meticulous about maintenance. The police report said brake failure on a sharp curve, but this isn't failure. It's sabotage. My stomach twisted. Did you take this to the police? Linda asked. I did, Angela said. I spoke with Detective Ramirez, but the next day my apartment was broken into. Nothing was taken except my laptop and the original copies of these files. The implication was horrifying. There's more, she said quietly. The night before his accident, Matthew called me. He said he'd confronted your husband again. That Gerald had made a threat, not directly, but he said something about removing obstacles. I felt the blood drain from my face. That same phrase had appeared in Matthew's journal. Obstacle. My son had become one, and now he was gone. By the time we left the cafe, I felt as if the ground beneath my feet no longer existed. The man I had shared my life with, my husband, the father of my child, was now someone I feared. Someone who may have murdered our son. That evening, Mark made a call to someone he trusted, Detective Samantha Blackwell, a state-level investigator with a reputation for discretion and integrity. We met the next morning at Linda's house. Detective Blackwell listened carefully as we laid out the evidence, Matthew's letter, the financial files, the audio recordings, Angela's testimony, and the photographs of the brake line. These are serious allegations, she said, eyes narrowing with quiet focus. Financial crimes are one thing, but if there's evidence of foul play in your son's death, we'll need to move carefully. Your husband has a head start. I nodded. But he's coming back. In a week, he told me to have my things out by the time he returns. Detective Blackwell leaned forward. Then we have a window, and I want to use it. With your permission, we'd like to install surveillance equipment in the house. Audio, video, everything. And we'd like you to meet him when he comes back. I stared at her. You want me to confront him? Not exactly. We want you to play along. Be the version of yourself he expects. Let him believe you're defeated. The more comfortable he is, the more likely he'll reveal something. The thought of pretending, of looking into the face of the man who had possibly killed our son was nearly unbearable. But I knew she was right. I'll think about it, I said. That night, sleep was impossible. I wandered Linda's house, eventually ending up in her study, staring at old family photographs. One in particular caught my eye, our family at Matthew's college graduation. Gerald had his hand on Matthew's shoulder, a smile on his face. Looking at it now, I couldn't help but wonder, had it all been a performance? By dawn, I had made my decision. I called Detective Blackwell. I'll do it, I told her. I'll meet him. We moved quickly. 2 days before Gerald's scheduled return, the surveillance team entered Matthew's house and installed hidden microphones and cameras. I returned the following day, just as Gerald had expected, still living there, still waiting, still seemingly broken. But I wasn't broken. I was prepared. Before going to bed that night, I opened Matthew's safe one last time. Among his belongings, I found a small item I hadn't noticed before, a sleek black pen. It was heavier than it looked. Inside was a hidden voice recorder. Detective Blackwell had her equipment, but I wanted my own copy. That night, I slept in Matthew's room, surrounded by his memory, and steadied myself for what was coming. Tomorrow, I would face Gerald, but I wouldn't be the same woman he thought he left behind. The morning light filtered through the windows as I stood before the mirror. A 66-year-old woman stared back at me, tired eyes, silver streaks in her hair, and lines that life had etched over time. But beneath the weariness was something new, resolve. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Flight landed early. Be home in 1 hour. Have your things ready. Gerald. I texted Detective Blackwell immediately. Her response came quickly. Stay calm. Officers in position. Remember the plan. I dressed in the clothes Gerald would expect me to wear, subdued, simple, familiar. I activated the pen recorder and slipped it into my pocket. Then I sat in the living room, hands folded in my lap, waiting. At precisely 8:17 a.m., a car pulled into the driveway. I heard the sound of keys, the front door unlocking. Gerald walked in with the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. Tanned from his tropical getaway, he looked years younger. The contrast between us, his glow and my grief, was almost theatrical. Scarlett, he said flatly, setting his suitcase down, I see you're still here. I needed more time, I replied quietly, careful to sound hesitant. He moved through the house casually, picking up objects, touching Matthew's things with a sense of ownership that made my skin crawl. Have you signed the papers? He asked. Not yet. He sighed. I don't know what you're hoping to gain by dragging this out. I looked at him, letting silence build tension. I still don't understand why you chose the day of our son's funeral. There's never a good time, he said coolly. Matthew's passing just accelerated what was inevitable. My voice trembled. Did your plans include hurting him? His hand paused mid-reach for a drink. For a second, something flickered across his face, surprise, maybe fear. Then it vanished. What an absurd thing to say. I pressed on. Matthew told me he was worried about the company. He wanted to meet with me about it. He discovered the offshore accounts, the Costa Rica property, the transfers. He turned sharply. You've been going through my things. No, I said evenly. I went through Matthew's. He kept records of everything, including your conversations, including the phrase removing obstacles. His glass froze halfway to his lips. I continued. The brake line on his car was cut. He set the glass down slowly. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, it's a fact. The police are reinvestigating the crash. And the finances. His mask cracked. You have no idea what you're doing. I think I do, I said. You plan to leave me, to erase everything, but you forgot one thing: Matthew wasn't afraid of you. And now, neither am I. He stepped closer, fury etched across his face. You think you can threaten me? I don't have to, I said, pulling the pen recorder from my pocket. You did it to yourself. His eyes widened. Then he lunged. He grabbed my arm with startling force, spinning me around. I stumbled, falling hard against the floor as the pen recorder skittered across the hardwood. Gerald rushed to grab it, his face twisted with rage. It's over, Gerald, I gasped, trying to stand. You're right, he growled. It is. He raised a clenched fist, and then the front door burst open. Police, hands where we can see them. Detective Blackwell entered, weapon drawn, flanked by 2 officers. In seconds, they had Gerald pinned and cuffed. His chest heaved with disbelief as they read him his rights. This is insane, he shouted. She's lying. But it was too late. They had heard everything through the surveillance. They had the recordings, the files, the evidence. His time was up. As they led him past me, he leaned in one last time. This isn't over, Scarlett. But in that moment, looking into his cold, desperate eyes, I knew it was. The power he had held over me for decades through intimidation, silence, and control was gone. That evening, as I sat with Linda in her garden, a call came from Detective Blackwell. We found something else, she said. You should come to the station tomorrow. The next day, I met with her and a representative from the insurance fraud division. His name was Nathan Reynolds. In the course of investigating your husband's finances, he explained, we discovered a 3rd life insurance policy, one on your life. I blinked. Mine? He nodded gravely. Taken out 5 years ago. The payout $2 million. But I'm alive, I said slowly. Detective Blackwell leaned forward. We don't think you were meant to be. When we searched his luggage after the arrest, we found a vial of potassium chloride. If used properly, it would have mimicked a heart attack in autopsy. I sat in stunned silence. Matthew hadn't been the only target. I was next. Later that night, I walked alone on Linda's porch. The night was quiet, cool. The stars shimmered above, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself feel the weight of what had happened. Not just the betrayal, not just the loss, but the survival. 3 months passed. Gerald's trial ended with a guilty verdict on all counts: 1st-degree murder, financial fraud, attempted murder, life without parole. I didn't attend the sentencing. Instead, I spent that day at the community college attending my design class. At 66, I was the oldest student there, but I was also the most determined. I used the settlement from Gerald's assets and Matthew's insurance to start over. I moved into a modest apartment and began working with a local nonprofit that supports older women recovering from loss and betrayal. One evening, I hosted a small gathering: Linda, Mark, Angela, Detective Blackwell. We toasted to Matthew. To the son who protected me even after he was gone, I said. And to the woman who found her strength, Linda added. As the city lights twinkled below my balcony, I knew this wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of me, Scarlett Brooks.
My name is Tessa Holloway, and my mother's funeral was 2 days ago. 2 days.